Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Longley's Line Podcast. I am your host, Stephen Longley. Remember to like, follow, subscribe on all of our social medias. Stephen Longley for me, Longley's Line for the show, Light Style Studio here for the studio. And as you all know, we bring in very special guests all over the entertainment industry. And today is no different. Today I have Mr. Pak Castillo.
Yes.
Thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it very much. Before we get talking into really anything, go ahead and promote all your social medias where everybody can find you.
Okay, so
everything like that.
What we're looking at is basically my name, Pak, which is spelled P-A-K, and then Castillo, C-A-S-T-I-L-L-O, PakCastillo.com. That's one. Or you could just go with one Pak Castillo. That's usually my handle for social media. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a running joke because everyone's like, Pak, and then I spell it Pac. They're like, Pac or Pak like Tupac? And I'm like, yes. Pak like Tupac, but it's one Pak because two's dead.
Yeah.
I mean, God rest his soul.
He will be up here
at
some point. I have Biggie, but he's over in the corner right now.
You got to have the yin and the yang.
Exactly. So where are you from originally?
Reno, Nevada.
Born and raised, and where'd you go to high school at?
McQueen High School.
McQueen? Okay.
Yes.
We've actually had a few McQueen people come through here.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, all kind of varying ages, but mine was, I went to Spanish Springs.
Oh, did you? Okay.
So I was way out there when we moved in here. And
way out.
When you were a kid, before kind of getting into high school, what did you want to do for a living? Did you have like a aspiration to begin with?
All right. So aspirations, no. So acting definitely was, I would think, on the back burner for the most part. It was the cliche stuff, astronauts, begging my mom to go to the space camp. And then after that, it was, for some reason, she told me, and I don't necessarily remember, but she said I wanted to be a corporate lawyer. No idea why. That's just a thing.
You just wanted to practice law, saw Law and Order one time.
I think I was just drawn to the knowledge, and I think in my head as a kid inherently was the respect factor of the whole thing. You kind of had this almost prestige about it. At least as a kid, that's what I thought.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. They had this presence about them where they come in the room and it's, all right, everybody quiet. It's time to go.
Yeah. I think I just was drawn to that as a kid.
Yeah.
For sure.
I get that. Mine was more, I was like, same thing. Firefighter, astronaut, stuff like that. And then as I grew up, it was more of like a music producer.
Interesting.
Somehow. So I was like, well, I love making music, and I had my allowance saved up for the longest time. I'm in high school. I'm like, okay, I'll get a beat maker. I'm sitting in my room making beats. I made one beat, and I was like, no, I'm not very good at this. I should probably stop.
And then just done.
Yeah, and then I bought it at whatever I bought it, sold it at the same price. I was like, well, no harm, no foul.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, if anything, you gained a little knowledge of what you didn't want to do.
Exactly. And so in high school, did you do theater or anything like that, or was it sports?
I was kind of drawn to the whole acting situation simply because, well, one, my dad, he generations, decades, he was doing martial arts here. He's from Korea.
Okay.
He taught Taekwondo in Reno for a very long time. He really broke in a little bit into the acting and everything else, and I was raised in martial arts. That's kind of my go-to as far as the foundation of where my athletics came from. Mm-hmm. So I was watching Van Damme, old school stuff, doing the splits on the chair, kind of like, I don't know, maybe Steven Seagal, Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, you name it, right? I was just raised in that. I'm going to throw Bob Ross in there because I just love the guy.
Wow.
He's got his own art.
Yeah,
but
he does his own thing.
But for the most part, it was more of what that ended up gravitating towards. But I didn't really understand where I can go with that as far as acting's concerned.
Sure.
I knew that I was drawn to voice at one point. But similar to you, I think in kindergarten, I just was... we didn't have a lot of money growing up, so we didn't have an instrument or anything else. So when it came to elementary school and stuff like that, basically went to voice because it's free.
Yeah.
And I remember one time I really wanted to vocalize, and then at one point it was just me, and then it was pretty much just all girls, and it was just me and this other boy. And I was I just kind of went at it with almost like a high note, and I just saw a couple girls giggling. To me, I thought that was they were teasing me.
Yeah.
Maybe they were just like, oh my God, whatever it is.
Right.
But in my filters as a kid, I was like, oh, I'm definitely not going to be doing that again.
Oh no.
So I kind of stepped away from that and eventually revisited. So in high school, I started gravitating a little bit more towards, okay, maybe I could do some acting, maybe I can bust into a little bit of voice and everything else, because I was always doing those types of imitations anyway. I could do like a little like James Earl Jones. I was just kind of doing some of those different types of things where at one point I was like, it's actually worth looking into. But in Reno, I didn't really see like an avenue of approach to do it other than drama school. Like,
sure.
And I didn't do that. I ended up going more towards art and acting and writing for the most part.
Okay. Have you?
I'm not acting, I'm sorry, athletics.
Oh, I thought, what did you play? Or what kind of athletics did you?
Pretty much ran, the gamut. I went through everything. I went through, track was a huge one for me. I did football. I did soccer. That was more just to be with my friends at that point.
Yeah.
But then martial arts. So it was basically football, track, and martial arts was kind of like my go-to, like pole vault,
the main
hurdles,
thing.
all that stuff.
Yeah. And how did you? So you were already saying that acting was kind of already in the back of your mind. Did you have something aside from like the martial arts aspect where you had these larger than life figures that you'd always see, like Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan and all of them? Was there something kind of specifically that was like, maybe I can do that. Like, maybe that's something I want to do.
Yeah, it's funny. I can't really like come to a particular like aha moment where I'm just like, oh, bing, I want to be an actor. It was kind of a gradual situation, but I knew when I had caught myself throughout the years when I was watching particular films, which I was listening and also thinking about screenwriting of how I'd want to alter those particular words and how they did the delivery and why it was effective or not.
Yeah.
And once I started realizing I'm not just watching film, essentially, I'm watching how I would put myself into that particular character.
Yeah.
I started realizing that there's a particular interest in here that it's almost undying. It ended up becoming something where I realized that's a a passion that almost just crept up inside me, which I hadn't realized.
Yeah.
It was just so subtle.
I know exactly what you mean. Mine was sort of the same way where I never gravitated towards theater or anything like that. As a kid in elementary school, you have to do the plays and stuff because they're like, oh, you're going to be Hansel from Hansel and Gretel. I'm like, okay, here I go. And, just a little kid kind of being a part of the plays. And then as time goes on, when I was in high school, same thing. I focused on athletics. So I was football, wrestling, lacrosse. I did all of those in high school. But every time a camera was in front of me, it's like, oh, okay, here we go. It's time to be in front of the camera. And someone was like, Steve, can you come and be a part of this? Yeah, sure. And then I'd jump in front of it and just have fun. And we'd all make, videos and stuff in high school. And then there was a point later on where I was like, I think I want to try to pursue this, and just kind of stepped my foot into it. Was it sort of the same way where you kind of had that feeling in there, and when it didn't work out because those girls were giggling at you, where you were just like,
yeah, so
maybe I'll try it?
That was in elementary. I'd say like fast forward into high school. I think similar to you in that aspect. I think it was more, I did take one drama class, and I really kind of it was more for the sake of curiosity, but I didn't put 100% into it because I really did not fully understand what was going on there until later. So I'm actually kind of grateful of the fact that I would consider myself more of a late bloomer when it comes to this stuff, because I ended up going through high school and then discovering later on, like, wow, okay, so I did all those things that I would say, I usually call them like almost fear-based decisions, right? I wanted to be an artist, but I didn't want to be a starving artist. Yeah. Not that I've ever been a starving artist, but as fear goes, what is it? False evidence appearing real. I had basically this circumstances of which I thought that, okay, I'm going to be a starving artist if I go for these particular passions. So I was like, you know what? Let's do a compromise. I'll major in architecture. I can still be creative at the same time. I can make some money. So greatest decision I think I did, which was going to Vegas and studying that, going into an internship for a firm, and really discovering at that moment, that is one of my aha moments, is that you cannot, as much as you would like to, and you can, I think we all have a really high tolerance for it, but you really cannot compromise what the soul wants. You really can't. Yeah. As much as I tried to go for that, and believe me, and I've tried. I mean, it's gone to the point where I think even my day job. So I'm in the military. I've been in the military for quite a bit now. And
what branch of the military?
Army Nevada Guard.
Okay.
And I've been there for a bit. And I learned a lot, and it's been obviously a staple for a lot of the foundations of how I look at things and how I behave and things like that. But there was also like this element to it where I was able to, and this is not necessarily something I think that the military necessarily promotes, but I was able to maintain an individualistic or individuality throughout the system. I almost call this thing, basically, it's like to me, it's like a communist. I don't know, I'm probably going to get some backlash for this on the military.
No letters.
But to me, in the military, it honestly, it reminds me of like a communistic system protecting a republic, which, so individuality in a lot of different ways cannot really flourish in that particular way unless you kind of break through the mold, you rise to the ranks,
Sure.
And you're allowed and given that. But throughout that, I was been able to really see through the fear-based decision to go into architecture, going into the military and everything else. I honed in a lot of the fact that I know that subtracting the things that you do not want, you go in and actually walking through those particular doors, which you think are good for you, is just as important or significant as the ones that you actually try to pursue or you think that you want to go to.
Yeah, where it's you think you should, what you want to do.
Yeah.
Like kind of the two separate things. And it makes sense when it comes to like kind of the high school thing of athletics. Like you learn to be a part of the team and it kind of molds you like you have to help this team out, but you're the individual where you shine in your own certain aspect, right? So it's like you are in the military and you're doing this thing where they make you a part of this one big unit, but yet you get to keep your individuality in that sense. So as you're going through it and you're doing kind of the architecture and you're doing everything, what are those simultaneous or?
Yes, they actually were.
At the same time? Okay.
They were. It's funny that they were, to me, essentially, that it's an element to it where there's security to it.
Okay.
There's a way of which, like in the military specifically, I think like also in a lot of ways that we look at life as far as, let's go with the contrast of like what film and auditioning and acting versus like 9-to-5 jobs in military. Like you have that reliability of steady paycheck. Although you have a ceiling of what you're actually, for the most part, capped at is what you monetarily are worth, right?
Right.
You have the military almost the same way. You got the regulations. You've got everything literally laid out for you to live exactly how you're supposed to. If you go, you don't necessarily need to go outside those parameters. You don't necessarily have to make a lot of decisions based out of that box. It's such a contrast when it comes to acting.
Yeah.
You know, we're essentially looking at a situation where we're doing job interviews all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, we're doing job interviews all the
Constantly.
time. And you've got to be available all the time in different aspects, and it's really interesting. So I know I guess like the common phrase of don't quit your day job kind of thing. Well, I just did that. I just did that recently.
Yeah.
I've been working for a job for about 13 years as a systems analyst for the military. And I just put in my resignation for that. And now I'm actually going, as far into film as you possibly can.
Pursuing it full time.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm working with my friend on some things as far as creativity and marketing as well. But I mean, focusing really on that screenwriting, voice acting.
Yeah. Doing all the major things that you want to do.
Yes.
Like getting into it. And it makes sense as you're talking about it where it's like you have that security blanket because of the day job, but just like you said, where we're going on interviews constantly. And when it comes to auditions, one thing that I've always heard and that I've said a few times where it's like you'll go out for 1,000 auditions and hear one yes, maybe, when it's a huge thing. You go out for a day job and trying to find something simple and you'll get like 2 or 3 yeses because they're looking for like, well, he's sort of got these qualities and these qualities. But when it comes to an acting job, you can have 10 right qualities, but they're looking for 11.
Oh, yeah.
You know, something simple like that, where you can just nail the audition. Everybody there is happy, having a good time, looking at you like this is the best, like this is our guy. And then you hear the following week, we decided to go a different direction.
Yeah. If they even give you that notice.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't even do that.
A lot of times that
I would
courtesy
say,
isn't there.
for the most part, you don't. You just kind of sit there and wait, and you're like, should I be blocking out dates right now? Because I feel like I killed it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I have
yeah.
no idea. So it's like, yeah, I think I listened to one of your interviews just recently on that too, because I think you had a particular instance where that actually did happen, where you nailed it. They were laughing, they were on the floor, and they're going with a different direction, which makes, you know, and it's funny too, because I get that. I've noticed that sometimes where I'm just like, I walk out of the audition. It's not even that case anymore. I guess it's really self tapes, but for the most part, like coming out feeling really good about what I did, not getting it, or coming out and being like, wow, that was not a POC that I expected coming out and did not look good. And the next thing you know, getting a call going like, wow, we really liked what you did. I'm like, what the hell did I do that made that look good at all?
Those
didn't feel good.
Are you sure? Or what were you watching that I didn't?
Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about. And then they just saw that one little thing that they liked, and they were like, you know, we're gonna keep this guy coming back. And then they do you for round 2 or round 3 or something like that goes on, and then you actually nail that audition, and then you get the booking, and then you're like, well, I guess I did something right.
Yeah.
You know?
It's like one of the mysteries, like, right, it's almost like we want to ask the casting director, or even the people that actually have that project, be like, all right, what did I do? What did you like about that audition that I can bring with a more significant or passionate way to the table with that? Because that's essentially what they're doing. And, it is funny, like, my agent, I got a couple of agents. I got Tabitha from KIT International. She represents me over in Northern California. And of course, Justine, which I think is mentioned a few times here. Yeah. True Talent.
It's a running theme for people here in Reno. If you do acting or anything entertainment, True Talent, Justine.
Yeah. Both agents, awesome. Just boss ladies that are just kicking some ass. I love it. And and what's great is they expect, and as they should, I think a lot of actors that you get an agent, you're like, all right, well, just, I'm just going to wait for you. And they really do expect you to bring up that type of content and everything else. Yep. And when it comes to interview after interview after interview, at one point you really do have to put that content up. And like what you're doing here is fantastic. This is really good because you got the podcast going, you got exposure, you're getting a little bit more traction in exposing not only for yourself, but meeting particular talents of which is great in connections, and 2, community-based interactions which give you connections. I think essentially what I've learned and I've seen, and you probably have as well, and I'd imagine the people that are actually watching this probably have, is the majority of professionals, A-list on down, are essentially saying that the biggest part of this, a little sprinkle of luck, is essentially networking. It's essentially building those particular relationships and being reliable in that way. So that's one of those big things that I find so far is a pretty big takeaway. But honestly, and maybe it's because my experience here in Northern California in Reno, but I feel like the personalities here have been, for the most part, really grateful. Like they're nice. Everyone seems to be extremely nice, all the time. Like you get those people like, oh man, they're going to be just, really snobby or pretentious and this and that.
They'll
and
start drowning if it starts raining.
Maybe
like
that's the
nose
case.
right up in the air.
Yeah, I have not experienced it myself. However, I have not really put a lot of time in LA. There might be a pretty good situation out there with that stuff. Yeah. So that's a whole different ballgame there though. But
which you hear the constant horror stories about LA where it's like you go in and then people are just like, oh, just another name. They don't even care. But a lot of the times, for exactly what you said, with Reno here, everybody is so grateful to be working and to actually have people to come in and make content with, and then just have people to work with that they actually enjoy working with, that are either nice, fun, energetic, directable, where that's
another one.
One of the things that I've always prided myself in is that I am either fine to work with on set, and fine as in like he's a good person to have because he's nice, he's upbeat, he's there, and he's easily directable. If they tell me to do something, I will do it. There have been times in the past where, I'm still learning and trying to figure things out on like one of the first 2 acting gigs or something where they're telling me, all right, you're doing this, you need to stop doing that. I'm like, you got it. And then I do it the next scene where I'm just like, I have no idea what I'm doing. It's just a nervous tick or something. And then you learn and you keep going. And then the people that you continue to meet and work with, I appreciate you saying that with this, because this is something that I've enjoyed because I get to meet new people around the industry that are following the same journey, that are also very appreciative to come on and tell their story. And then not only does it benefit me, because then it's like, hey, I get a new person to come on and people can see him, and then like views can go up or whatever it is, like, subscribe,
Yeah, exactly.
but then it gets them on and it tells their story, and then all of a sudden somebody's maybe like, oh, I'll check out this person, and then they'll get reached out to for something, and then it'll benefit their business, and then they can grow. And it's one of my favorite things.
It is. It is. Hands down, that's great for. I'm trying to do it. I'm trying to. Drives my agent crazy, I'm pretty sure. But like, I'm trying my best to get into the whole social media. I'm trying my best to like connect and etc. I personally I know this is first impressions, but I tend to be more of an introvert.
Sure.
For the most part, and I feel as if for me, I get a little bit more inundated with a lot of the stuff that I would like to work on, etc. So when it comes to socializing, networking, etc., I'm not necessarily that strong at it yet.
Yeah.
And I'm still like the story of having huge or significant followings on social media, or having a big presence online and stuff like that. I'm still trying to adopt that narrative,
Right.
and without having to necessarily, because right now I'm still kind of like 60-70% disagreeing with that, just only because of the fact that I'm thinking like, all right, well, I get the content part. Putting your stuff out there with the particular content that really shows what the caliber of acting that you're actually doing, right?
Yeah.
But having followers and having a particular large following, perhaps maybe I think for me that might be great and beneficial in a different way for like maybe reality show auditions. And then, comment if you want to as well, to maybe like if you beg to differ in any way, but like maybe for reality shows, maybe for, I would say like commercials or stuff like that. Having a larger influence seems like a really good thing. But when it comes to like feature films, to me, I know that I'm personally going to be doing some writing and inevitably some directing later on, but like for feature shorts, etc., right? I don't think that I would necessarily, unless my mind changes in a different way, that I don't see that like that being necessarily a big significant factor when it comes to actually looking at a particular person or a talent that actually fits the role and comes at it with an honest and authentic way.
Right.
I'm getting there.
Sure. Yeah.
It's really hard to really kind of adopt that, but yeah.
I get it too, because there have been certain people that I've seen where it's like I've worked with them in the past, and we follow each other on social media, something simple like that. And I've seen it before where there is a guy that I know who I've worked with, and we did just like this tiny little thing in San Francisco. It didn't blow up huge. It was maybe like 1 or 2 ad campaigns, something simple like that. But I follow him on social media. He doesn't have this huge, giant following, yet every time I see him post on social media or he does something on stories, he's at a gig. He's doing something. But he doesn't have like this huge, like 25,000 followers or something crazy like that. He's got, a couple thousand, something simple like that, but he's constantly working. So that may be the exception to the rule.
I think there is. I think there's got to be an exception.
But I know what you mean, because it's difficult for things like this where you need the clicks.
Yes.
You need the likes, because then as soon as you get 100 or some odd people watching, then other people start watching, and people from outside, and then you'll get somebody watching from Idaho who's like, oh, this in Reno, this is interesting. I didn't know about that. And then it starts growing and growing, and then
that's a really good point. That's a valid point.
You know what I mean?
Like, that's a good. Well done. I honestly think that is a very good point. To put into my story of the fact that why would this be beneficial? That actually does make sense as far as visibility when it comes to the people that matter. So ones that are directors, ones that are casting agents, ones that are, that does make sense. Okay.
Yeah.
I get that's one point to that one. I like that.
It's just something that I've seen from out, and it's you're walking a tightrope.
Totally,
You know what I
totally.
mean? And then it comes from the different aspects where it's like, well, I need these clicks, I need these follows, I need these. But then I get the right people that come on, and then I get interesting people like yourself that's also doing the same thing that I'm doing, trying to make sure the acting thing's out there, where 1 million followers would be cool, I guess, but then everybody's seeing my stuff, and then now I post my dog, and then they're like, well, what kind of, I thought you were more of a cat person or something. And then you get,
I think there's a balance for sure.
and then you get the public out there. And the public is, the
Yes.
public's the public.
Public is the public.
And it's hard to always sway in the right direction.
It is.
Yet, if you get the right eyes on it, then it can grow. And then to jump back, kind of, it's a positive thing for this is when I get different people on there, I get to hear different stories where I have 2 or 3 different caliber of directors that come on and have different visions. Yet they're all a little similar because they have a vision that they want to do, and then as soon as you bring up the filmmaking process, their eyes light up. They're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, this one film that I just worked on, and we were doing it like this, and we were going into this," and just they light up and instantly start talking about it, and that's kind of the beneficial thing about this too, because then they have an outlet to talk about that kind of stuff, and people are like, that does sound pretty interesting. Let's go
It
watch.
does. Yeah.
You know?
And the shared passion on that, and it really is, it's infectious for sure.
Yeah.
I actually, like even across any kind of sector, really, if you find someone who's ultimately in their passion, no matter what it is, I find it pretty intriguing and interesting anyway, just when I'm talking, let alone someone who's actually in film and really about what they're about. Because it's interesting just to even hear the styles of approach on what people do for acting. I think that it's for me, I get what you're saying on the social media thing. And for me, what I probably will continue to do is create particular contents that get me into showing a little bit more of what I'm capable of doing. I think that's what it is. For me, like the social media of like posting personal stuff and trying to be really personable and stuff like that, sure, that can get to a certain degree of like maybe a following of people that really are just getting to know you and inherently like who you are as a person, which is great. But there's also that other end where I'm feeling, as my journey as far as acting is concerned, is like, I won't necessarily say that I'm like just now getting into the industry because I've been doing this for, maybe like 5 to 7 years. I'm not entirely sure. I don't know the anniversary date.
I'm
but
roughly around there.
What, right? Something like that. And I think at one point, like, content creation is going to be a big one. As far as I know, in my experience so far, the biggest thing is really getting into the point where you actually create your own content to put yourself out there in the particular type of characters that you would actually like to see yourself in when it comes to significant projects that are or higher visible projects. So that's essentially where my journey is headed to now. And that for me is more of a screenwriting. It's more of actually getting a particular type of crew to actually produce proof of concepts or any type of shorts at this point. And inevitably, I mean, not even just inevitably, but like at the same time, simultaneously getting into those particular auditions and making those particular connections with those people who know that you are reliable, who know that you're going to be able to deliver, and also can see their particular vision. I think it's good to be reliable. It's good to also deliver, but there's a shared vision, I think, that people need when it comes to the particular characters or project that they're actually creating. Yeah. And that was one of the biggest lessons, I think, for me on a lot of that, especially when it comes to acting, realistically. It's, I think, being as a late bloomer and actually identifying and seeing what I would do essentially like in high school for that one class that I took, or coming into a particular acting studio with, well, actually Justine's studio, really. And the way acting actually happens. Yeah. I mean, you could probably relate, but for me, I started to notice, and other than maybe with a very few exceptions, I think when it comes to the type of acting, what I've noticed throughout my career is actually seeing that when it comes to maybe picking, let's just pick a pretty significant character like the Joker, right?
Yeah.
The Joker's been played so many damn times.
Sure.
It just has. But there's so many different ways of doing it. And the last two Jokers, won 2 Oscars?
Yeah.
So
And two completely different ways
characters.
to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And I find that fascinating. And I think when it comes to actors coming into this and really and studying under, like, one of my favorite acting coaches was Waters, who worked with Justine as well. I had a really good notion of when you act, you're not necessarily, I mean, there's acting to it, but there's a lot going inside that inevitably needs to be bubbled up to the surface so the audience understands what's going on. It could be very deep. I remember seeing one student in acting class, and he would be not necessarily stoic, but there wouldn't be a lot of action coming outward.
Sure.
You knew there was a lot happening inside. And then after the scene would happen, we'd ask him, and he would lay out this brilliant, deep, like, perspective of the particular character, what he was doing with the subtleties of like even a hand movement, etc. And I was just like, wow, that's amazing. But there's something, and that's what it should be. That's what should happen.
Yeah.
But there was an element that was missing, of which was that needs to bubble up to the surface to allow the audience to be with you in that thought.
Yeah.
That was a huge one. That was one of the good realizations for me.
Because you can think about it so much, but it also depends on if the audience is picking up on it.
Right.
Because you can only do so much. If you came up with this whole backstory and you're like, well, this, if I wave my hand like this, that means it's done. But then the audience might be watching and they're just
saw,
like,
it could have been a fly.
Yeah.
It could have been waving your hand.
You're like, did you see a lint? What are you
Exactly.
doing? Yeah.
You have no idea. And that's essentially, it's hard because, granted, like, when you look at some of the Oscar movies, I usually gravitate toward watching some of those ones that the Oscars had chosen for them to be awarded for whatever, right? Usually original screenplay, etc.
Yeah.
But sometimes I watch it and I'm like, it seems so deep and so subtle that you'd have to, like, literally go in there and just, like, understand all the little details and
Stop it frame
Easter
by
eggs,
frame
whatever.
and write
Oh my
things
gosh,
down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And granted, that's great and brilliant, and I love the fact that they're putting that out in a message. I don't necessarily know. It kind of reminds me sometimes of, like, that type of acting. Like, you can go to that level of depth. But I think there is a point where there's got to be something that comes to bubble to the surface. I think that's part of it. Another thing for me is what I learned was in acting, a lot of people will be something, right? They'll be angry, and they'll be happy. And to me, I find that really interesting because I used to, in the very beginning, I think the majority of us probably did, they're like, be happy, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna be happy,
Done.
and I'm happy, and I'm smiling, and I'm laughing, and it's just like, but it's not necessarily that, or like be angry, right? And like sometimes, it's not just be angry; it's be angry Stephen. It's be angry Pac. It's what does that look like in this particular scenario? So you're not the Joker, right? You're not Joaquin Phoenix or Heath Ledger wasn't really the Joker. They were the Joker, but it was Heath Ledger as Joker. It was
Their variation
Joaquin
of it. Yeah.
as Joker.
Yeah.
So they brought who they were if they were in that life, in that particular character. And so they bring out an authenticity of who they would be if they end up embodying that as a social or coping mechanism or a survival coping mechanism as the character, as the Joker.
Yeah.
So that to me was just like, okay, so if someone actually does, if they're like, be angry, well, sure, be angry. But there's also an element of like, sometimes when you're angry, you just start laughing, right? You just like, you're just so pissed, and that's what it comes down to.
Yeah. I thought about something like that too, where there was, I can't remember who it was, but there was an interview with a woman and the director was like, okay, be mad. Same thing. Get angry. And she was like, okay. And she started yelling and screaming and doing this, and he just kind of went, do you think the character would do that, would freak out like this? She goes, huh, maybe you're right. And then they did the scene again, and instead of doing this entire flip out, freaking out scene, she was quiet the entire time, just brooding, stoic, and made the scene that much more powerful because it's that everybody can yell and scream, but then when they turn it into something different, like how would this person react to it? But also, in my own mind, like the initial thought is happy, smile, sad, cry, angry, yell. But how would you do it along with the character and kind of mishmash the two together?
Yes.
To find your own way to do it. And I recently heard Tom Holland on an interview, right? Spider-Man. And his acting chops, everybody's like, yeah, he's Spider-Man. We know. Like, he is a cool talking, fun, nerdy kind of kid, whatever. But he's done these other acting roles where he's British, but he's done a lot of American roles. And he said specifically, I like doing the American roles because when I get to change my accent, it makes it where I'm somebody completely different. And I can change from, well, I'm Tom doing this to now I'm so-and-so doing this. And then it completely takes him away and turns it into somebody else. And then it brings that performance where he can be like, here's this person. And then they put all of their body into that, you know?
Yeah.
So I think exactly what you're saying. There's so many different ways that people can just bring their own character into stuff.
It's unbelievable. To me, so there was a particular, because I like to look at acting as someone, because it is really an embodiment of who we are in the collective. And also, it's at the same time, like, it really can come to a point of a depth of who you are, what work you've done with yourself, and in a lot of ways, what you bring to the table of the experiences you had as a person living on this earth. And that, I think, when you come into a particular character, you're essentially, so the writer will bring you a character, you are bringing yourself, and then you essentially make a third person, like, in that way. And a lot of that, I think, when it came to one of my friends, she had mentioned she was like an astrology reader, right? And sometimes I dabble into the woo-woo world. Sure. And
Gotcha.
and I said, like, for couples, like, how do you do the readings for them? And she essentially said, well, it's a reading for three people. And that really actually struck me, because I was thinking, okay, there's a reading for three people, because in a relationship you have one person, you have the other person, and then you have that third person. It's that relationship, that particular entity of which you both have to water to make it grow and support. And it's kind of changed a little bit of the trajectory that I have when it comes to acting, when it comes to that, where I'm actually creating almost this other person, which is me and the character that someone brought in a relationship.
Yeah.
And it ended up being a really interesting way of actually looking at it, to get into that, because it's not just you now. So parts of you become that. So to get yourself out of, like, I think, like Anthony Hopkins when he became Hannibal Lecter, right? I remember, I think he was getting an interview and they asked, like, so who did you study? Did you study anybody that was a serial killer and everything else? He said, nah. He said no. And I thought that was interesting. He legit just, he's like, I'm not going to give any energy or acknowledgement to anybody who's harmed anybody else like that.
Yeah.
I thought that was freaking brilliant. I was
Yeah.
like, holy shit. So
That's
this
smart.
pretty much was him. Like, Anthony Hopkins just made up his own, like, one of the best villains of, like, the century.
Who only had like 10 minutes of screen time.
Right.
It was
Yeah.
that's it.
It was like the dinosaurs in the first Jurassic Park. There was like 13 minutes.
Yeah, and that's all you see. And to kind of jump back a little to when you first got into it, do you remember what your first acting gig really was, that you really stepped into it?
Ooh, that's a good one. Where I actually really got into that. I don't even think it was an acting gig. I think it really was. It was a showcase, I think, for Justine in acting class or an acting school, and we basically just had this, like, showcase for friends and family to show up.
Right.
And you just kind of, you go up there, you're on stage, everyone sees you, and that's kind of like, you're kind of just thrown in.
Yeah.
I think that was my first time. That was my very first time showing up in that class, doing an official acting training. And it was Waters. She was sitting there, and I just showed up and, like, just super green. I'm like, hey, so what's going on? How's this? We got class coming up soon. In Waters, she's crazy freaking and passionate. She's very passionate, and she just she'll throw you in, and that's what happened. So basically, they had a showcase going on. The stage was there. There was parents and friends and family or whatever just in the audience, and it was all this thing that they prepared for, like, I don't know how long, maybe like several weeks or whatever, right? So the actors already had all this other stuff. She's like, well, what's your name? Pak. I'm Waters. So they have a showcase. He doesn't have a partner, so why don't you go on stage? Here's the premise of what it is, and just go up there and then just roll with it and go from there. That was my first like acting gig. Was just like right up on stage with someone who's already prepared for a lot of it. Yeah, just thrown in.
Yeah.
And I was just, that to me, I was just like, it embodied me. And that's kind of, I've noticed a lot of my theme of how I suppose my life is. When it comes to things, I just have to just jump off the cliff to happen, to do it. And that was one of those situations. From there, there's been a lot of ways, auditions for sure. But as far as acting gigs in those particular instances, there have been a few, but that one really stuck out to me just as a showcase in general.
Yeah.
I did have a golf commercial reel. It was like probably several months ago. I'm not sure, which basically you had to have like this real kind of almost bravado type energy about it, and like all this stuff. That was actually pretty fun. But I remember doing take after take after take after take, trying to read these particular lines that had to go under a specific amount of seconds, and it was off a second, off a second, off a second. So I don't even know how many takes. I could tell you that it was dozens and dozens. I would say we're well over 50 takes for this commercial.
I did the same thing relatively recently where they were like, all right, it's going to be a 30-second spot. I'm like, super. And we did takes. It was like, all right, we're going to try and shave a couple seconds off. Don't say this, okay? Take. All right, now don't say this. Take. And it was like, now we're doing the 15-second. Take. It was the same thing. Just kept going down until you're like, are we good? I'm freezing.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's the name of the game. But that, like, to me, that brings out a lot of the effort and the energy that comes within even a role that's not necessarily a feature film.
Yeah.
I'm still, to me, I still feel as if I have a lot of which I can go ahead and, give my all in a lot of different ways.
Right.
And so I'm waiting. Like, I know that what I'm capable of, but like as far as I would say, being able to allow that to come out into fruition with different types of projects. I know that for me, I'm going to have to do that on my, at least I'll go through auditions and I'll do that. But I think my content that I'm going to have to create, and I think this is probably going to be imperative for the most people that are going to be doing acting anyway, is putting and creating your own characters to do so. Yeah. And that's like, to me, the theme at this point is just to really show the caliber of acting that I have in front of the people that are creating these particular projects that challenge me in those roles. Yeah. I've been like, the commercial gig is great. The modeling stuff, that's not something I had really pursued as much.
I was going to ask, I kind of fell into that one too.
I did fall into that one. That was actually more of so my partner, Dania, who's a director, writer, brilliant, freaking amazing woman in film who's been doing it for a while. She's been doing modeling as well. So basically what happened is she had this particular, or I don't even know what you call it, like a photo shoot that she had in her mind of which she's been waiting to actually do. And so we had met, we had talked about it. And at one point she's just like, well, I think this would be great for us to do. So that was essentially, I've done some photo shoots and I've done some stuff like print work. Yeah. But model stuff I hadn't. And that was my first time really going and doing some photography in that capacity, and then submitting it to basically magazines. Yeah. And getting published, which I was like, okay, that's how that works. That's pretty cool. Yeah. But I had not anticipated that's just something that I kind of fell into. I'm not opposed to it. It's just something that I hadn't really pursued in a way that I would with, like, say, voice or acting.
Yeah, I'm the exact same way, because it was mine where I had a buddy who was a photographer. He knew I was trying to get into acting, and he was like, well, why don't you reach out to these people since you're fine with getting in front of the camera? And I was like, sure. I'm no model, but I'll go and do it, whatever. And then I kind of fell into it where it's like there aren't a lot of males that are actually there to get in front of the camera for photography-wise. Like it's mostly, like female driven because there's a lot of fashion, a lot that goes into it. But every time I was like, well, sure, I'll try it. And then I reach out to a photographer and was like, well, let's do some. You know what? I don't have a lot of males in my portfolio. Let's go ahead and do this. And then I kind of fell into that world as well, where it's like trying to do it, even though, I don't have a 6-pack or anything like that. I'm just kind of there and I'm comfortable. Yeah, sure. Get me in front of the camera. Where do you want me to stand? I'll be over here. Like, what do you want me to do? Look that way, look this way, look at you. Like, how do you want me to do it? And then kind of fell into that. And then I'll get messages every now and again, like, so-and-so wants to get into the modeling world. Can you tell them what to do? Like, I guess. Reach out to photographers. Sure. Like, here's what I've done. And I just reached out to these people and said, do you want to shoot? And they were like, yeah. So I completely get that, where it's not something you pursue, yet it's something you kind of fall into.
Yeah, that does
working out a little.
That definitely happens. There's just so many photographers out there. There's a lot of photographers out there now. So that they want to shoot. It's almost like a trade. You get the photos, and then they get to shoot you, and there's all this other stuff, and it's a whole different ball game. It's a whole different world out there. But there's so much that goes into that play.
Oh yeah,
and it's really an avenue of approach. And I've noticed when it comes to this stuff that I have to really start honing in on the priorities, because the energy and the time really of what you have available to pursue something is just completely it's really difficult to really try to divvy it out in a shotgun like kind of way. You can't really just burst out on this stuff. It's one of those things. Like for me, modeling, cool, I'm down, obviously, but when it comes to the acting and the voice and inevitably the screenwriting and everything else, and getting that stuff really honed in on, that's going to be the bread and butter for me at this point, because that's what I'm more gravitating
Can
towards.
I ask, for the voiceover, what particular avenue do you want to go down? Do you want to do animated features? Do you want to do like Chevy commercials? Like, what's kind of the voice
That's a
route?
good one. That's a good one. So both. Honestly, all of it, really. I love animated features. I'm an anime dude, first off. Although I don't speak Japanese, so I might have to do the dub version, which I'm okay with.
Yeah. Oh no, I guess I'll do it. Yeah. I'm right there with you.
Yeah, I'm cool with that. The Chevy stuff, the deep voice stuff, all that kind of stuff. I really, in that, not even that, but even vocal training. I've done some vocal training, so like singing, and quite possibly it's done right. Even a musical, I might even dabble into that. I'd be okay with that.
Disney, are you listening?
Yeah,
Come on.
So you have like one of the ones that I actually did like, because it's really difficult for me to really get into musicals sometimes. Moulin Rouge, I actually did enjoy. That one I actually did.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
That one I just,
I did not want to.
They had like Nirvana in there and stuff.
My wife made me watch it one time. I'm like, all right, I guess I'll watch it. I'm watching. I'm like, damn, this is actually pretty good.
Yeah, it's actually good. I'm in my
this.
car just singing. I like downloaded the songs. And I'm singing some of these songs.
Like whenever McGregor does the cover of Your Song by Elton John, that'll come on my playlist, and I'm just like, oh, nobody's watching.
Yeah.
I'm about to belt this out.
Windows are rolling up.
Yeah.
And just going like,
turn the AC on, here we go.
Yeah.
I'm right. I'm at the same point where it's like, I want to pursue the acting and make that the main goal. But the number of times that people are like, you've got a nice voice, you should go ahead and do this. I'm like, really, me? No, No. And then I start, doing this where it's more of just like it's a talking show. So it's mainly just my voice. And I'm like, I would like to pursue that a lot more and then get into, the Chevy commercials or Ford or whoever, GMC. I'm not particular. Whoever pays, I'm fine.
Right.
So it's like, I'd like to get into more of that. And then you see the longevity of those careers too. Because the actors, when they come in, it's their face. That's who they see.
Yeah.
There are so many different voiceover actors that have been a voiceover actor since they were 20, 21 and are in their late 70s now and still do it and are constantly doing something, where it's like a Ron Perlman is my perfect example for that. The guy who was Clay on Sons of Anarchy or Hellboy. He's this big name actor, but you can watch Tangled from Disney. He's in that. He's in Invincible.
I didn't know that.
He's in so many different animated things because he has this unique voice that he can also change a little bit and do something different, and it keeps the longevity going. And he's, well into his 60s, 70s, something like that, and he's still keeping the career going. So I'm right there with you when it comes to the acting and the voice, trying to do something where I can do both of those.
Right. I mean, why not too? Especially if you bring, that type of light, not light in like light versus heavy, but light as far as like the colorful fluctuations in personality that comes in the voice when it comes to actually reading something like that.
Yeah. Bringing that character out.
That's ageless.
Yeah.
It really is. I mean, essentially, as long as your vocal cords are working, I mean, you look like whatever you want,
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong, though, too. Like, I think in acting, we tend to go through these situations where we have to be good looking and et cetera. And granted, those are some advantages, for sure. Keeping in shape, being this particular archetype of what beauty looks like in society.
Yeah.
There is that. But I think a lot of people get discouraged because when they go into acting, they start seeing a little bit more of the looks that you were mentioning, and it can be disheartening. And at the same time, when you do go to, essentially we do self-tapes most of the time since COVID, but there are going to be in-person callbacks and et cetera, and you're looking and you go and you're like, wow, they all look like me. If not, they look better. And not only that, they're probably even more talented. Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah.
And you get all these insights. And it is true. They do start looking like you. You go in. And it's weird. It's like at the beginning, I remember like, that can't be really the case. I mean, but I remember going into a callback, like, wherever it was in the Bay Area, and looking around, I'm like, oh my God. Like, 1 Pac, 2 Pac, 3 Pac, 4. Like, damn.
It was like, what's your mom's name? Get over here.
Yeah,
like,
it was crazy.
Got to make sure. Are we cousins in some way? Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
I know exactly what you mean. Where they have a certain look, and that's why you're there. Because you fit that look. But then it's, much like to go back to before, it's like, can you bring your own individuality to this character and make it your own? Which is what we all want to do. And then, you've been in the callback rooms where you're sitting there waiting to go in, and you can partially hear what's going on in the back, and then you kind of hear how they're doing, and you're like, that's sort of how I was going to do it.
Yeah. And then you go, great, I'm going to come in here with a cookie cutter situation.
And then you're looking back at the script, and you're like, maybe I should change how I say this word. Something simple like that, and then all of a sudden, you go in with this different mindset, and you nail it, or you don't. It's kind of that whole thing with
and
the
thing
acting.
is, and what's really funny about this stuff too, because like you can nail it, and it really comes down to it. It's really difficult to kind of discern, or even maybe like kind of detach from the fact that perhaps that role just wasn't made for you, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to like one where you get it, that was obviously made for you, or not. Sometimes there's some flops, and you're like, oh wow, that was not good.
Yeah, and you don't want to take it to heart if you don't get it.
My bad, everybody.
Yeah,
But-
sorry guys, you paid for it. My bad.
But for the most part, like it is one of those things where I think where you end up, you go through for these particular roles, and sometimes they're just legit not meant for you, and which is a good thing.
Yeah.
I think for when you start like listening to some of these particular movies that reached out for a particular actor and didn't get that particular actor, and then you're like, oh wow, thank God, because that I can't even see, right? I don't even think, like say for instance, I don't know. Love It or Hate It, but Matrix. I think they tried for, I think, Will Smith. I think they tried for Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
And eventually went to like, Keanu Reeves, and he's hella good. He's really good at what he did.
It's Bill and Ted. Let's
Yeah,
go.
like, and it is perfect. He played the role fantastic.
Yeah.
And at one point, I mean, he also plays the role in that way where, he's always like, what? I know Kung Fu. Like, it's like, I was like confused all the time. In the Matrix, you're kind of confused because like in his world.
That's the point.
So we all kind of
went
with confused Keanu in this journey of the Matrix. And I'm sitting there thinking about it, like, could I see Brad Pitt or Will Smith actually being that? Like, like if you see like, Brad Pitt just like kind of waking up and be like, I know Kung Fu. Like, I'm not really sure about that.
This handsome son of a bitch, we know he knows Kung Fu. Stop it. Or it's like Brendan Fraser with The Mummy. They had a couple different actors for The Mummy. And then Brendan Fraser ends up getting it, and you talk to anybody who's like, well, could anybody else be the lead role in The Mummy? No.
No.
That's Brendan
See?
Fraser.
Yeah.
Like, that was that was him, you know? It was made for him. Even if they had somebody else in mind, nobody else can see it any other way.
Yeah.
And I think that perfectly describes, sometimes it's not meant for you.
It really
And
isn't.
that's okay. And you have to have that kind of thick skin when it comes to the acting business, because you'll put all your heart and soul into whatever you're doing, and then you might not get it. Or you will, or you won't.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to roll with the punches, and you kind of have to be ready. Okay, maybe they saw me and they liked me. However, so-and-so had just this right look that they were going for. And then you see it later on and you go, okay, I get it. And then maybe down the line, they'll see what you're doing and they'll want to have you back for something different. So
Yeah.
like, I like this person.
That's a good
You
point
know?
too. Is like you audition, you kill it. It's just not maybe for that particular character.
Exactly.
And they will, and they do. A lot of casting directors and a lot of people, they really want to see people succeed. They want to see you succeed. They want to see you create and be this character.
Yeah.
And you're right. If it doesn't fit necessarily, which is totally fine, they do tend to keep you on the books and like,
Yeah.
wow, this person, I'm gonna have to keep them in mind because they've got something that we could use, we can
Yeah.
work with, and I love that. I think that's fantastic. That's a good point.
Yeah, if it does come back, it will. And that kind of brings it back to the whole marketing and network of this whole industry that we're in. You got a market, you've got a network. Even as you said, coming in, it was like a little more introverted. It's like, I'm the same way. I don't, like, if I wasn't doing something like this and I'm going to a big event, I don't want to sit and chit chat with people. I'm here.
It's a lot of energy.
I'm here to be here. I like to be laid back, you know, like I'm not the loudest person in the room. And when the loudest person in the room is doing their thing, you do your thing. I'm going to kind of be over here. And then if somebody's next to me, maybe I'll strike up a conversation or something. But we're the extroverted introverts that if the camera's on, we're happy to be in front of the camera. But then as soon as it's off, it's like, my couch sounds really nice right now. Like, I'd like to just be home,
Yeah.
solitude, and kind of just hang out with myself, you know?
Yeah, and I really do enjoy the intimate settings when it comes to that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Those conversations in general.
Because then it makes it a little more, exactly what you said, intimate, and it kind of takes a lot of the pressure off of being in this big crowd, and then you kind of have to, well, that's over there, and that's over there, and, you know, and you kind of have the one-on-one chats,
Yeah.
which is a little nicer.
I think that you probably have actors that are introverted, a lot of them coming into this in a successful way too.
Yeah.
I think there's an element to it. I mean, it's not like a requirement. Clearly, there's like you have an array of different type of personalities that go into film. But I think for me, is if I can label an advantage on my end is being, I suppose, in a way like living in my world more than the norm.
Yeah.
I find that I am able to come up with a little bit more of an originality of my world to bring it out to character.
Right.
And not only that, I have a yearning sometimes to be able to embody someone who is, in essence, coming out with a little bit more of a projected personality, etc.
Right.
So there's an advantage on that. It's almost as like I honestly feel, maybe this is me on this one, like almost like that gunpowder situation where you're almost like packing in that gunpowder enough for that explosion of not necessarily energy in a way that it's actually like loud, but enough where it comes out to the surface in such powerful subtlety that it could come into the camera.
Yeah.
Because that was essentially on film, right? Like you have such a small space to work with, but any type of little subtleties are going to be shown to the audience. It could be anything. It could be a wink. It could be a wave of the hand, but it just depends on how you use it.
Yeah.
And I think being in that space, being in my world, and in constantly, almost always living in that, looking at the shows that we watch, and then really putting myself in those particular characters and seeing how I would deliver it versus how they did.
Yeah.
I think that comes into play quite a bit.
I think about that constantly too when I'm watching someone who's like, how would I deliver that? I think about it all the time. But Puck, we're going to get you out of here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for coming in. I really appreciate you sitting down, talking me, telling some of your stories, kind of spitballing the ideas and going over everything. Before we do let you go, go ahead and promote your social medias again for anybody to follow you wherever you want people to find you.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And thanks for having me, by the way. That was fantastic. I think we can go on all day with this. Like, it makes sense. You're just like, oh man, we're going to have to cut this, eventually, which totally cool. So, again, Pak Castillo, and the first name's P-A-K, and Castillo, C-A-S-T-I-L-L-O, .com. That's my website. One Pak, basically my name with the one in front of it. That's my handle for Instagram. And inevitably, I will probably end up having the YouTube channel as well coming up. Want to do eventually a podcast as well, so that'll happen. That's going to be in the works. Nice. But those are my primaries at the moment, so we're going for that. So appreciate it.
Well, you guys heard it here first. Go ahead and give him a follow there. Remember to like, follow, subscribe on all of our social medias here. Stephen Longley for me, Longley's Line for the show, Light Style Studio for our studio here, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
Yes, appreciate you watching if you did this whole thing, because I'm pretty sure it's going to be like an hour. I don't even know.
A little bit, but I mean, they'll sit through it and it'll be enjoyable.
I'm very grateful for that. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks. I appreciate you coming in.